control is only effective when it has something to grasp onto. And when you choose silence, you remove their grip entirely. They may try harder, push further, or create more noise to get a reaction from you, but the more you hold your peace, the weaker their influence becomes. Silence is not passive. It is a deliberate act of reclaiming your power and an unspoken declaration that you will no longer be controlled. When you remove yourself from the cycle of engagement, your absence becomes louder than any words you could say. People who thrive on ego and manipulation expect a reaction. They expect you to plead, argue, or try to explain yourself. They want you to be present in the conflict, emotionally entangled in their web of control. The moment you choose to walk away, to disengage completely, they are left with nothing but the weight of their own actions. Your absence is a void they didn't anticipate, a silence they can't manipulate. When you're no longer there to feed their pride, they begin to feel the emptiness of their own behavior. Without you reinforcing their sense of importance, they lose the very thing that made them feel powerful. The absence of your energy forces them to confront themselves, and that confrontation is far more painful than anything you could have said. It challenges their inflated sense of self, making them question their own worth and influence. People who rely on control often build their confidence on how others respond to them. If they can keep you talking, keep you explaining, keep you emotionally invested, then they feel validated. But when you remove yourself, when you stop answering their calls, stop reacting to their words, and stop showing up for their gangs, they are left with nothing but their own reflection. Your absence is not just a physical one. It's emotional, mental, and spiritual. It is the ultimate statement that they no longer have a hold on you. And the truth is, nothing destroys an ego faster than realizing the person they once controlled no longer even acknowledges their existence. Ego is like a fire. It needs fuel to keep burning. And the fuel it craves the most is attention, whether positive or negative. As long as you're reacting, you're giving them power. People who operate from a place of arrogance and manipulation depend on your energy to maintain their sense of superiority. They provoke, they insult, they create conflict, not necessarily to win, but to keep you engaged. Your reactions validate their importance, making them feel in control of the situation. But when you choose silence, you take away the very thing that feeds their ego. Suddenly they are speaking into a void. Their words lose power, their actions lose impact, and their control starts slipping. They expected you to fight back, to explain yourself, to justify your actions, but instead you've left them with nothing to hold on to. That emptiness forces them to confront a truth they never wanted to face. Their influence over you is fading. Without your response, they become desperate. They may try harder to get your attention, pushing boundaries even further just to provoke a reaction. But the more you refuse to engage, the more they realize that their tactics no longer work. And that realization is devastating to an ego that thrives on validation. Silence is not indifference. It is intentional. It is a refusal to be manipulated, a conscious choice to starve their ego instead of feeding it. Over time, they will either be forced to change or be left struggling with the emptiness of their own unchecked pride. By refusing to engage, you don't just protect your peace, you dismantle their false sense of power, leaving them to wrestle with the reality of who they are without an audience. Silence is a mirror, and not everyone is ready to face their own reflection. When you refuse to react, when you withhold your energy and words, you create a space where the other person is forced to sit with themselves. Without your responses to distract them, they are left alone with their thoughts, their choices, and the consequences of their actions. The ego, which thrives on external validation and control, suddenly has nothing to push against. It begins to turn inward, seeking answers it can no longer manipulate out of you. People who rely on ego-driven behavior expect conflict. They expect explanations, emotional outbursts, and endless justifications. They know how to twist your words, shift blame, and keep you entangled in a cycle of proving yourself. But when you break that cycle by choosing silence, they are left without a script. They start questioning themselves. Why aren't you giving them another opportunity to dominate the conversation? The lack of engagement forces them to confront the reality they were trying to avoid. Their power over you is slipping. This internal battle can be uncomfortable for them. Some may try harder to provoke you, raising their voice, creating drama, or even playing the victim just to get a response. But the more you maintain your silence, the more they are left to sit with their own actions. Eventually, the weight of their unchecked ego becomes unbearable, not because you called them out, but because you chose not to. And that silent confrontation, the one they have with themselves, is far more powerful than anything you could have ever said. When you choose silence, you take back control of your inner peace, and that in itself is a powerful act. Ego thrives on disruption, on creating chaos that drags you into its storm. It seeks validation through conflict, through provoking you into emotional responses. The moment you rise above it, when you refuse to feed into the drama, you remove its fuel. The more you stay silent, the less their ego has to feed on, and the more you strengthen your peace. Silence isn't just a withdrawal from the external noise, it's an internal commitment to protect your mental and emotional space. In a world where everyone seems to be vying for attention, silence is an act of self-respect. It sends the message that your peace is more valuable than winning an argument, more important than proving a point. It shows that your self-worth isn't dependent on anyone's opinion or approval. The person trying to provoke you, the one aiming to drag you down to their level, has no power over your state of mind unless you give it to them. By maintaining silence, you create a barrier between your calm and their chaos. Their words may sting, their actions may cut deep, but you choose to rise above it. You choose not to let their need for control infiltrate your peace. When you resist the temptation to react, you show them that their ego cannot control you, and you remind yourself that your worth is unshaken by their behavior. Post-political emotional stabilizing, silences and rejection in many ways breathed freedom. Silence is not just about saying nothing. It's about standing firm in your peace, choosing not to let anything or anyone disturb it. It's a declaration that your serenity is sacred and you won't let anyone tarnish it. God fights for you when you stay still, when you choose silence in the face of provocation. The world may expect you to defend yourself, to explain, to justify every action, but in those moments when you remain quiet, God steps in. Silence is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of trust. Trust that God sees what you're going through, that He understands the weight of the situation, and that He is working on your behalf even when you can't see it. When you are provoked, it is natural to want to respond, to assert yourself, to prove that you are in control. But sometimes God is asking you to lay down your own desire to control the outcome. He is asking you to trust Him to fight the battle for you. By staying silent, you are letting go of your own attempts at retaliation and surrendering the situation to God's time. He is the one who can bring justice, who can bring clarity, who can turn things around in ways you can't even imagine. Choosing silence is choosing to let God take the reins. It's saying, I trust you, Lord, to handle this. God is not blind to the injustice, the mistreatment, or the confusion you may be facing. He is working behind the scenes, moving mountains and shifting hearts in ways that you may never see. But in that stillness, in that silence, you are making space for his power to move. Mowgli. It has been spoken by the colonial governments that God is not sending peace. You are allowing God to fight for you, knowing that his victory will be far greater than anything you could achieve on your own. Emotional restraint is your greatest weapon because it allows you to protect your peace and maintain control over your reactions. In moments of provocation, when your emotions are stirred and the desire to react is strong, choosing to withhold that reaction shows strength, not weakness. The ability to remain composed in the face of hostility or manipulation doesn't come from suppressing your feelings, but from recognizing that your emotional response can be the very thing that gives someone else power over you. By exercising emotional restraint, you choose to rise above the situation. You refuse to let another person dictate your mood, your peace, or your sense of self-worth. While the world might urge you to react, to defend yourself, to argue your case, emotional restraint allows you to step back and see things from a higher perspective. It's not about being you're deliberately choosing not to engage in a battle that's not worth fighting, not allowing yourself to be dragged into a negative emotional cycle. The power in restraint lies in your ability to stay grounded, to not allow external circumstances or people to disrupt your inner peace. The more you practice emotional restraint, the more you build resilience, the more you develop a deep sense of self-control. It's not about avoiding conflict. It's about handling it with wisdom, maturity, and grace. Emotional restraint allows you to respond from a place of strength, not reaction. And that strength, over time, becomes your greatest weapon against any external force trying to unsettle you. Silence shows confidence because it's an act of knowing who you are and what you stand for. People who are secure in their identity don't feel the need to constantly explain themselves or defend their actions. They don't need validation from others to affirm their worth or purpose. Silence in this sense isn't about avoiding confrontation. It's about choosing not to engage in a battle that doesn't require your energy. It's an acknowledgement that your peace and self-assurance are more important than proving a point. Confidence comes from a deep sense of knowing that you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to chase after recognition, fight for attention, or engage in endless arguments to make yourself heard. When you're comfortable in your own skin, when you know who you are and whose you are, silence becomes a powerful way to hold your ground. It's the quiet strength of someone who is unshaken by external noise or criticism. People who are confident in themselves understand that not every issue requires a response. They know that sometimes the best way to respond is to stay silent and let their actions speak for them. Silence shows that you are not desperate for approval or validation. You are self-assured enough to let others speak their piece while you remain centered in your own truth. In a world that often rewards noise, silence is the loudest statement of all. It's the declaration that your confidence does not depend on others' opinions, but on your own unwavering sense of self. Ignoring someone who thrives on ego removes their power over you because it breaks the cycle they depend on. People who manipulate or control others often rely on one thing: your attention. When they provoke, belittle, or stir up conflict, they are looking for a reaction. Whether that reaction is anger, frustration, or a desperate attempt to defend yourself, it validates their position and reinforces their sense of control. But when you refuse to engage, when you stop feeding into their drama, you take away their influence. By ignoring them, you not only deny them the validation they seek, but you also stop their ability to manipulate the situation. They may try harder, escalate their behavior, or look for new ways to get your attention. But the more you remain silent, the more they realize that their tactics no longer work. Their power is directly tied to your emotional response. And when you stop responding, they are left with nothing to hold on to. Ignoring them does not mean indifference. It's a conscious decision to protect your peace. It means you recognize their need for control and you refuse to give them the satisfaction of affecting your emotional state. When you no longer react, they are left with their own frustrations and the power dynamic shifts. It's a quiet form of resistance, a way of saying, you no longer have a hold on me. In that space, their ego begins to deflate, and their ability to impact your life diminishes. Silence, in this case, is not passive. It is an act of reclaiming your power and your peace. Silence becomes your closure because it eliminates the need for further explanation, justification, or engagement. When someone hurts you or betrays your trust, there may be an urge to get closure through conversation, to seek answers, to express your feelings, or to try to make sense of the situation. However, sometimes the best closure is not found in words, but in the decision to no longer give energy to what cannot be changed. By choosing silence, you are setting a boundary that says, I don't need your validation or your explanation to move forward. It's a recognition that some things are better left unsaid, and that some people are not worth the emotional investment of further interaction. Silence becomes the final statement in a chapter that's already been written. You don't need to rehash old wounds or seek closure through dialogue, because your silence tells them everything they need to know. When you stop chasing answers, when you stop looking for reconciliation in a situation that no longer serves you, you gain control over your own peace. You stop allowing their actions to dictate your emotions or your next move. Silence is not about avoiding the truth. It's about choosing to move forward without being dragged back into the past. It's a declaration that the story is over, that the lesson has been learned, and that your peace is more important than any explanation or apology they may offer. Through silence, you close the door to further hurt and open the space for healing, growth, and a future free from unnecessary drama. In the end, silence is not just the absence of words. It is the presence of strength, wisdom, and peace. It is the weapon that dismantles egos, disrupts the cycle of manipulation, and allows you to rise above the noise. When you choose silence, you are not weak, passive, or indifferent. You are showing the world that your peace is sacred, that you will no longer allow anyone to control your emotions, your worth, or your story. Through silence, you protect your energy, reclaim your power, and allow God to fight the battles that are beyond your control. You silence the noise of the world to hear the quiet strength of your own soul, standing firm in the knowledge that your value doesn't depend on the approval or validation of others. In this quiet space, you are free, free from the expectations, free from the drama, free from the need to prove yourself to anyone. So choose silence. Let it be your response, your closure, and your strength. In that silence, you will find a power that words can never capture. And in that power, you will find peace.